Good morning, America. How are ya? Monday Morning Rail. Hi, I'm Denny Jelsma, and I'm at the world famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida, where the sun always shines and running trains is an absolute pleasure. It's Monday, and you know what we do on Monday? You guessed it. We do show and tell. But before we go to show and tell is always brought to you by Jelsma Graphics, the people that make all the embroidered railroad clothing, from hats, shirts, jackets, custom shirts like what I have on here. You need anything embroidered on your favorite railroad, just go to jelsma.com. That's JELSMA.com. Go on the web, send us an email, whatever. With all that being said, show and tell starts right now. Show and tell starts right now, and we have a very exciting show today. We're going to talk about the Rock Island. But before we start, I want to thank once again all the viewers that watch us on Facebook and on YouTube. We get far more views on Facebook for some reason, but we just want to say thank you. But typical Monday morning is from 10 to 15,000 views, and we really appreciate it. And once again, Richard and number 2 will sign glossy photos every Monday morning from 6 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. in the morning. So the show I want to talk about, show and tell, is the Rock Island. You know, the Rock Island was a railroad that was heavy into the passenger business, and you name the train, they had it. They had it from Chicago to Denver, Chicago, Minneapolis, Chicago to Perry. The Rock Island, whenever they're one of the longest long distance trains in America, was from Minneapolis to Houston, and that was the Twin Star rocket. And why they called it the Twin Star, because Minnesota was the North Star and Texas was the Lone Star, and they called it the Twin Star rocket. It was 20-some hundred miles, just the longest passenger train in America. But as passenger travel dwindled in the 60s, and May 1, 1971 was D-Day for the railroads. You either joined Amtrak, and what you did, you had to give all your equipment, and you had to pay them a certain amount of money. The Rock Island chose not to, and I don't want to get into all there's a lot of political and also financially. The Rock Island was basically broke. They just didn't have the money to join Amtrak. And so they chose to run a passenger train from Chicago to the Quad Cities on the Mississippi and Iowa, Illinois border. And so of Davenport, Rock Island, Bettendorf, and Moline. And they called it the Quad Cities Rocket. And it was kind of a unique train. It was about 156, 160 miles, took about 3 hours. The Rock Island's main line was all over the system, was a disaster, but the main line to the Quad Cities was decent, and part of it was because they kept it up for the commuter service in the Chicago area. And so the train that I'm modeling, and I love the Rock Island, grew up watching the Rock Island Rockets, was the Quad Cities, and typically they ran about everything that you could imagine they would put on a train. When somebody would say, oh, that's not really accurate, you could model anything in Rock Island and it would be close, because I'll guarantee you the Rock Island had that paint scheme one time or another. And my rendition that I have here is I have an E8. Typically when they started this train, they had a E6. Number 630 was very famous, and they had the big wings. But mine is the E8, which they ran on the Golden State a lot. Mine has a baggage car. Sometimes they'd have it. Most of the time they didn't. And then they had 2 coaches. They ran every kind of coach you could imagine. What I have is 2 Bud coaches. And then they leased a observation dome, an ex-Chessie and Rio Grande, from the Butterworth Company. Butterworth was a company out of Chicago that did tours all over the country. And the Rock Island leased this car. Real quickly, the history of the Butterworth car was called Big Ben. You saw the name, the owner's wife's name appeared on it periodically. And when the Rio Grande bought this dome, they bought it and they put a diaphragm on the end so they could have mid-train service. This car ran on the Yapa Valley and also on the Royal Gorge. And the Butterworth bought this car and they put it in tourist system, and then they leased it to the Rock Island. They ran it one way going this way, and then they pulled it going back to Chicago. And so it was very popular. It had coach seats, and then they had a little snack bar in it where you could buy beverages and sandwiches, and that was always kind of sometimes they had them, sometimes they didn't. But the Rock Island ran this train up to about the 1976, 77 era, and they dropped it. But it was called the Quad Cities Rocket. And this is my rendition. It's a brass car, Rapido cars, and Walters, and a Proto 2000. And that's the way it is at the world famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida.